Men attack elderly woman without knowing her rescued dog was a former police officer. If you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more amazing content. Martha Bennett was a familiar face in her small neighborhood on the outskirts of Savannah. With her silver hair neatly tied back and her warm, welcoming smile, she was the kind of person everyone trusted. She always had a kind word for the shopkeepers, a cheerful wave for the kids playing on the street, and a reputation for baking the best apple pie anyone had ever tasted. But Martha wasn't alone. Her constant companion was Bruno, a large German shepherd with a glossy black and tan coat and eyes that missed nothing. People joked that he was as much a part of the neighborhood as she was. Wherever Martha goes, Bruno's sure to follow, they'd say. Bruno wasn't just any dog. Martha had rescued him years ago from a local shelter. He'd been malnourished, his ribs showing under his thin fur, and his eyes were filled with fear. But when Martha looked into those eyes, she saw something no one else had. A fighter, a protector. She brought him home, and in return, Bruno gave her his unwavering loyalty. "We're a team, aren't we, Bruno?" Martha would say as she stroked his head, her voice soft with affection. Bruno would tilt his head, his ears perking up as if to say, "Always." Underscore 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 underscore. Mornings with Bruno were usually peaceful. Martha would grab her coat, slip on her walking shoes, and the two would stroll through the narrow streets. They'd stop by the corner bakery for fresh bread, exchange pleasantries with neighbors, and enjoy the cool breeze. But that morning, something felt off. As they walked, Bruno's usual calm demeanor shifted. His ears were pinned forward, his body tense. Every few steps, he'd stop, sniffing the air, his gaze darting around like he was searching for something or someone. "Bruno, what's gotten into you today?" Martha asked, her tone light, though a flicker of concern crossed her face. She reached down to pat his neck, hoping to reassure him. Bruno didn't relax. He tugged at the leash, his focus shifting toward their home, as if urging her to turn back. "You're acting like there's a storm coming," she said with a chuckle, glancing at the clear sky. "Fine, we'll grab the bread and head back." "Happy." Bruno didn't respond, of course, but his taut posture spoke volumes. Underscore 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 underscore. At the bakery, Martha's usual smile faltered as she noticed two men standing across the street. They were strangers, something rare in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other. The taller one, his face shadowed under a baseball cap, leaned toward the other, murmuring something while keeping his eyes fixed on her. Martha felt a chill creep down her spine. She forced herself to look away, telling herself it was nothing. "Stop being silly," she muttered under her breath. But Bruno didn't think it was silly. His ears flattened against his head, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. His sharp eyes stayed locked on the men, his body as rigid as a coiled spring. "Come on, Bruno," Martha said, tugging gently at his leash. "Let's get home." As they left the bakery with a fresh loaf of bread tucked under her arm, Martha couldn't help but glance back. The two men were still there, watching. "Maybe they're just passing through," she thought. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Martha quickened her pace as she and Bruno made their way home. The fresh loaf of bread she carried felt heavier than usual, like it was pulling her down with each step. Bruno remained tense, his ears flicking at every small sound, his sharp eyes scanning their surroundings as if he were anticipating a threat. "What's gotten into you, boy?" Martha murmured, glancing down at her loyal companion. "You're acting like there's a ghost following us." Bruno didn't answer, of course, but his posture said everything. His muscular frame stayed rigid, his tail low, but wagging ever so slightly. Not with joy, but with alertness. As they rounded the corner onto Martha's quiet street, the feeling of unease grew stronger. The two men she had noticed earlier weren't following them, at least not openly. But something about the stillness of the street, the lack of the usual sounds of kids playing or neighbors chatting, set her nerves on edge. Maybe it's just me, she muttered, trying to brush off her discomfort. But deep down, she knew better. Underscore 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 underscore. What Martha didn't know was that across the street, in the shadow of an alley, the two men were watching her closely. "See, I told you," one of them said, his voice low and smug. This was Nate, a wiry man with sharp features and a perpetual scowl. "She lives alone. Just her and that mutt. Should be easy." His companion, Joe, a heavier-set man with a gruff demeanor, crossed his arms and frowned. "That dog doesn't look friendly. Did you see the way it was watching us?" Nate rolled his eyes. "It's just a dog. If we handle it first, the rest will be a breeze. Tonight, when it's quiet, we go in, grab whatever we can, and get out. She won't even know what hit her." Joe hesitated, his eyes lingering on the silhouette of Bruno as the dog followed Martha into the house. "I don't know, man. That dog's trouble." "Trouble for you, maybe," Nate snapped. "Stick to the plan. Underscore 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 underscore. Inside her small but cozy home, Martha locked the door and let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "There," she said, forcing a smile as she set the loaf of bread on the counter. "Safe and sound, right, Bruno?" But Bruno wasn't convinced. He stood by the door, his ears twitching, his nose sniffing the air. His low growl returned, rumbling softly like distant thunder. "Honestly, boy," Martha said, trying to keep her tone light, "you're going to give me a heart attack with all this growling." She knelt beside him, running her fingers through the fur along his neck, trying to soothe him. "There's nothing out there. Just us. Everything's fine." But even as she said the words, she didn't fully believe them. As the afternoon wore on, Bruno's behavior didn't change. He refused to leave the front door, pacing back and forth like a sentry on duty. Every now and then, he would pause, his ears perking up, his body stiffening as if he heard something Martha couldn't. By the time evening rolled around, Martha was exhausted. She tried to distract herself with a book, but the unease lingered, and Bruno's unrelenting vigilance didn't help. "Fine," she said with a sigh, closing her book. "You win. I'll check." She walked to the door, peeking out through the small window. The street was quiet, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet, as her gaze lingered, she felt a shiver run down her spine. "See, nothing there," she said softly, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to Bruno or herself. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Martha prepared for bed, double-checking the locks on the doors and windows. Bruno followed her, his every movement deliberate, his body tense. When she finally lay down, he took his usual spot in the hallway, but he didn't relax. His eyes stayed fixed on the front door, his ears alert to every sound. Martha tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. The memory of those two men, of the way they had looked at her, played over and over in her head. "You're being paranoid," she told herself. But just as she began to drift off, she heard it, a faint shuffle. Bruno's growl cut through the silence like a knife, low and menacing. Martha sat up, her heart pounding. "What is it, Bruno?" she whispered. A sound followed, a soft metallic clink, like someone tampering with the lock. "Please no," Martha murmured, her fear mounting. Before she could move, the sound of the door being forced open shattered the quiet. The calm was gone, replaced by chaos as two masked figures stormed into her home. And then, with a ferocious growl, Bruno leapt into action. The sound of the door crashing open ripped through the silence, jolting Martha fully awake. She barely had time to process what was happening before she saw two men storm into her living room, their faces obscured by ski masks. One of them, a wiry figure with cold, calculating eyes, held a metal rod in his hand. The other, bulkier and more hesitant, hung back slightly, clutching something Martha couldn't quite see. "Stay quiet, lady," the wiry one snarled, his voice sharp and menacing. "We don't want to hurt you. Just give us what we want." Martha's heart thundered in her chest as she stumbled out of bed, her hands trembling. "Please, take whatever you want," she stammered, her voice shaking. "Just leave us alone." The man's cruel smile widened as he advanced toward her. "Good. That'll make this easier." But Bruno had other plans. Underscore 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 underscore. Before the man could take another step, Bruno launched himself from the hallway with a guttural growl that shook the room. His massive frame collided with the intruder, his jaws clamping down on the man's arm with unrelenting force. "Damn dog!" the man screamed, dropping the metal rod as he struggled to shake Bruno off. Martha stood frozen, her back pressed against the wall as chaos erupted before her. Bruno's growls and the man's panicked shouts filled the air. The second intruder, the bulkier one, lunged forward, wielding a knife. "Get him off, Diego," he shouted, aiming the blade at Bruno. Bruno turned, his sharp instincts kicking in. He released Diego and dodged the knife, lunging at the second man with the same ferocity. The bulkier intruder stumbled back, crashing into a side table, sending a lamp shattering to the floor. Underscore 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 underscore. Diego scrambled to his feet, clutching his injured arm. "You're going to pay for that, mutt," he snarled, grabbing the metal rod again. Seeing her chance, Martha's eyes darted to the phone on the counter. Her trembling hands reached for it as she dialed the police. Her voice cracked as she cried, "Please, someone's broken into my house. My dog is fighting them off. Please hurry." As she spoke, her gaze flicked back to Bruno. The loyal German shepherd was a blur of fur and teeth, blocking the men's attempts to get past him. He growled fiercely, his only focus on protecting Martha at all costs. But the situation was escalating. Diego, desperate and humiliated, swung the metal rod toward Bruno. The dog dodged the blow with lightning speed, his jaw snapping inches from Diego's leg. The second man, now bleeding from a deep gash on his arm, yelled, "Diego, let's get out of here. This dog's insane." But Diego wasn't ready to give up. His face twisted with rage as he advanced again, raising the rod for another strike. Underscore 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 underscore. Before he could act, the room filled with the unmistakable sound of sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the window as the police car screeched to a stop outside. "Freeze!" a commanding voice shouted as two officers stormed into the house, their weapons drawn. Diego and his partner hesitated for a split second, exchanging panicked glances. Then, realizing they were out of options, they dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Bruno stood his ground, his growl rumbling low in his chest, his eyes fixed on the intruders. Even as the officers cuffed the men and led them out, Bruno didn't move until Martha whispered, "It's okay, boy. It's over. Underscore 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 underscore. As the door closed behind the police, the house fell silent except for Martha's shaky breathing. She knelt beside Bruno, her hands trembling as she stroked his fur. "Oh, Bruno," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me. You really saved me." Bruno let out a low whine, his body finally relaxing as he rested his head on her lap. He was panting heavily, his fur disheveled and damp with sweat, but his eyes stayed locked on the door as if ready for another fight. The officer in charge, a tall man with a kind face, approached her. "Ma'am, are you okay? Were you hurt?" "I'm fine," Martha replied, her voice still unsteady. She looked down at Bruno, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks to him." The officer crouched down, his gaze softening as he reached out to pet Bruno. "This dog is a true hero. Not many would stand their ground like that." Martha nodded, her hand never leaving Bruno's side. "He's more than a hero," she said quietly. "He's my family." The house felt eerily quiet once the intruders were gone, but the tension in the air lingered. Martha sat on the floor, her arms wrapped tightly around Bruno, who was still catching his breath. His ears twitched at every sound, his gaze fixed on the door as though expecting the men to return. "It's okay now, Bruno," Martha murmured, her voice soft but shaky. She stroked his head gently, her touch both soothing and grateful. "They're gone. Thanks to you." Bruno let out a low whine, finally resting his head on her lap. For the first time that night, his body relaxed slightly, though his eyes never left the front door. The officer who had stayed behind to take Martha's statement approached cautiously. "Ma'am, I need to ask a few questions," he said gently. "Can you tell us what happened?" Martha nodded, her voice trembling as she recounted the terrifying events. She described how the men had broken in, how Bruno had leapt to her defense without hesitation, and how he had fought relentlessly to protect her. The officer listened intently, occasionally glancing at Bruno with a look of admiration. When Martha finished, he knelt beside the dog, his tone filled with respect. "He's incredible. You don't see bravery like that every day, even in trained dogs." Martha smiled weakly, her hand still resting on Bruno's fur. "He's always been my protector," she said softly. "But tonight, he showed me just how far he'd go to keep me safe." The officer advised Martha to reinforce her home security. "Those men might not come back, but it's better to be safe," he said. "We recommend installing an alarm system and adding stronger locks to the doors and windows." Martha nodded, her face pale but determined. "I'll do whatever it takes to make sure this doesn't happen again." Over the next few days, Martha turned her home into a fortress. She hired a locksmith to install reinforced deadbolts, added motion sensor lights around the property, and even had an advanced alarm system put in. Each time the doorbell rang or a shadow moved outside, her chest tightened with anxiety. But Bruno was always by her side, his presence a constant source of reassurance. As the days passed, Bruno resumed his patrols around the house. He moved from room to room, his ears alert to every sound. Occasionally, he'd pause near the door or a window, letting out a low growl at the faintest noise. "You don't miss a thing, do you?" Martha said one afternoon, watching him from the couch. Her voice was warm, but her eyes held a lingering sadness. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Bruno." Bruno patted over to her, resting his head on her lap as if to say, "You'll never have to find out." Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore. Word of the break-in spread quickly through the neighborhood. Neighbors stopped by to check on Martha, bringing casseroles, flowers, and words of comfort. One afternoon, Mrs. Clara, a kind woman who lived 2 doors down, knocked on Martha's door with a homemade peach cobbler. "Martha, dear, we all heard what happened," she said, her voice heavy with concern. "That dog of yours is a true hero. He's not just your protector anymore. He's all of ours." Martha smiled, touched by the sentiment. "He is special, isn't he?" Clara nodded. "Special doesn't even begin to cover it. You've got an angel with fur, my dear." Underscore, 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 underscore. But even with the outpouring of support, the fear lingered. Martha couldn't shake the memory of the men's threats. In a dimly lit alley across town, Diego and Joe were nursing their bruises and their wounded pride. "That dog ruined everything," Diego spat, his voice laced with venom. His arm was heavily bandaged, and his face was twisted in anger. "Who would have thought it would be so aggressive?" Joe scowled, rubbing the cut on his shoulder. "I told you it was trouble." Diego's eyes hardened. "We're not done, Joe. Next time, we deal with the dog first. Then the old lady won't stand a chance." Joe hesitated, his face uneasy. "You sure about this? That dog's not normal." Diego sneered. "Normal or not, it's just a dog. We'll be ready." Underscore, 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 underscore. That night, as Martha tidied up the kitchen, an uneasy feeling settled over her. She glanced at Bruno, who was stationed by the door as usual, his posture tense. "You sense something, don't you?" she said softly, kneeling beside him. She ran her hand along his neck, her touch as much for her own comfort as for his. "If they come back, we'll be ready this time. Right, Bruno?" Bruno didn't respond, of course, but his intense gaze and low growl spoke volumes. As Martha prepared for bed, she double-checked every lock, set the alarm, and made sure her phone was fully charged. Bruno followed her closely, his steps deliberate, his movements calculated. When she finally lay down, he took his usual spot in the hallway, his eyes fixed on the front door. Outside, the quiet night seemed heavier than usual. Somewhere in the darkness, danger waited, but so did Bruno. The days passed slowly for Martha. She busied herself with chores and small projects, trying to fill the lingering silence in her house. The reinforced locks, the alarm system, and the motion sensor lights should have made her feel safe, but they didn't. Bruno didn't seem to feel safe either. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he would take up his station by the door. His ears would twitch at every creak, his body tense and ready. Martha often found herself sitting beside him, her hand resting on his broad back. "You're still on guard, aren't you, boy?" she whispered one night. Bruno didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on the door, his growl barely audible but persistent. Martha sighed, running a hand through her silver hair. "I don't know what I'd do without you." What Martha didn't know was that her fears weren't unfounded. Across town, in a rundown apartment, Diego and Joe were planning their next move. Diego sat at a cluttered table, his injured arm in a sling. His eyes burned with anger as he stared at a makeshift map of Martha's neighborhood. "This time," he growled, "we do it right. We take out that dog first." Joe shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He'd been uneasy since the first failed attempt, and the sight of the massive dog's teeth flashing in his memory didn't help. "You sure about this, Diego? That dog's not normal. It's like it knew what we were going to do before we even got close." Diego slammed his good hand on the table. "It's just a dog, Joe. It's not a mind reader. We'll be prepared this time." Joe hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously against his leg. What if we just let it go? There are plenty of other places. No, Diego snapped. His voice was sharp and final. We don't let that mutt make fools of us. We finish what we started. Underscore 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 underscore. That evening, Martha was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Bruno let out a deep, guttural growl. She froze, her heart pounding. What is it, Bruno? She asked, setting down the knife she'd been holding. Bruno's eyes were locked on the front door, his body tense and his fur bristling. He barked once, a sharp, warning sound that echoed through the house. Martha's pulse quickened as she grabbed her phone and moved toward the door. She peered through the peephole, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. The street was quiet, the only movement coming from the faint sway of the trees in the breeze. There's nothing out there, she said aloud, though the unease in her voice was clear. Maybe it's just a raccoon or something. But Bruno didn't relax. He paced back and forth in front of the door, his growl growing deeper. Martha placed a hand on his back, trying to calm him. It's okay, boy. You're just being extra careful, right? But even as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that Bruno was sensing something she couldn't. As the hours ticked by, Martha grew increasingly anxious. She triple-checked the locks and made sure the alarm system was armed. Bruno stayed by the door, his vigilant eyes never wavering. Come to bed, Bruno, she said softly, her voice betraying her exhaustion. But Bruno didn't budge. He let out another growl, this one more menacing than the last. Martha sighed, deciding to leave the hallway light on as she climbed into bed. She didn't bother trying to sleep. She knew it wouldn't come. Instead, she lay there, listening to the sounds of the night and Bruno's occasional growls. And then she heard it. It was faint at first, a soft shuffle, like feet brushing against the ground. Martha sat up, her heart hammering in her chest. Bruno, she whispered. The German shepherd growled louder now, his body rigid as he stood in front of the door. Martha's hands shook as she reached for her phone, dialing the police. Underscore 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 underscore. The attack begins. Suddenly, the metallic clink of tools scraping against the lock broke the silence. Martha's breath caught, and Bruno's growl erupted into a fierce bark. The sound of the front door crashing open shattered the quiet night. Martha screamed as Diego and Joe stormed in, their faces set with cold determination. Playtime's over, lady, Diego snarled, gripping a metal rod in his uninjured hand. Did you really think we'd just walk away? Bruno didn't wait for instructions. With a ferocious snarl, he launched himself at Diego, his massive body colliding with the man's torso. Diego stumbled back, the rod clattering to the floor as Bruno's jaws clamped down on his arm. Joe rushed forward, brandishing a knife. Get off him, you stupid mutt, he shouted. But Bruno was relentless. He released Diego only to turn on Joe, forcing the larger man to retreat. Martha, her fear momentarily overridden by adrenaline, grabbed a heavy vase from the side table. With all her strength, she swung it at Diego, hitting him squarely in the side and sending him reeling. Bruno, hold on, she cried, fumbling for her phone to call the police again. Underscore 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 underscore. The chaos continued for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes. Bruno's growls and the men's panicked shouts filled the house until the sound of approaching sirens cut through the noise. Red and blue lights flashed outside as the police arrived, bursting through the door with weapons drawn. "Freeze!" one of the officers commanded. Diego and Joe hesitated, their desperation giving way to defeat. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands as officers cuffed them and led them outside. Martha collapsed onto the floor, her entire body trembling. Bruno, panting heavily, walked over to her and rested his head on her lap. "It's okay now, Bruno," she whispered, her tears falling freely. "You did it. You saved us." The morning after the attack, Martha sat at her kitchen table, cradling a cup of tea in her trembling hands. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, but it did little to dispel the lingering shadows in her mind. The house was quieter than usual, save for the occasional sound of Bruno shifting on his bed by the fireplace. Bruno was exhausted, his breath slow and steady as he dozed. The scratches on his side and the tired droop of his ears were proof of his fierce battle the night before. Yet, even in rest, his ears twitched at every sound, and his eyes cracked open at the slightest movement. "You deserve to rest, Bruno," Martha whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She knelt beside him, gently stroking his fur. "You've done more for me than I could ever repay." Underscore 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 underscore. Later that afternoon, 2 police officers arrived to follow up on the incident. Officer Reed, a tall man with a kind smile, greeted Martha warmly. "Miss Bennett, we're glad to see you're safe," he said, his gaze shifting to Bruno, who was now sitting alertly at her side. The other officer, a younger woman named Torres, crouched to meet Bruno's watchful eyes. "And this must be the hero we've been hearing about," she said with a grin. "What a dog." Martha smiled, her pride evident. "He's more than a dog. He's my guardian angel." Reed nodded. "The chief heard about what happened and wanted to show his gratitude. We'd like to invite you both to the station tomorrow. We have a little something planned for Bruno." Martha tilted her head, curiosity flickering across her face. "Planned? For Bruno?" Torres chuckled. "Let's just say your boy is about to get the recognition he deserves." Underscore 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 underscore. The next day, Martha and Bruno arrived at the police station, where a small crowd had gathered. News of the attempted break-in and Bruno's heroism had spread quickly, and neighbors, reporters, and even strangers had come to witness the moment. Martha clutched Bruno's leash, her nerves buzzing. "This is all a bit much, isn't it, Bruno?" she murmured, glancing down at her faithful companion. Bruno simply sat tall, his ears perked, his gaze calm and steady as if he knew the attention was for him. The police chief, a robust man with a booming voice, stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "Today, we honor a truly remarkable act of bravery. In the face of danger, this dog showed extraordinary courage, protecting his owner and aiding in the capture of 2 dangerous criminals." He gestured for Martha and Bruno to step forward. The crowd erupted into applause as the chief held up a medal, small and gleaming. "This medal represents more than just bravery," the chief continued. "It represents loyalty, protection, and the bond between a dog and their human. Bruno, on behalf of our community, we thank you." The chief leaned down, placing the medal around Bruno's neck. The crowd cheered louder, some wiping away tears as Bruno sat stoically, his eyes scanning the room as though ensuring everyone was safe. Martha's eyes glistened as she knelt beside him. "You've always been a hero to me," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "Now the whole world knows it too." underscore 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 underscore. That evening, back at home, Martha prepared a special meal for Bruno, steak, cooked just the way he liked it, with a side of his favorite biscuits. She placed the plate in front of him, laughing softly as he sniffed it and wagged his tail in approval. "You've earned every bite," she said, settling into her chair with her own cup of tea. As Bruno ate, neighbors stopped by to congratulate Martha and thank Bruno. Mrs. Clara brought over a homemade chicken casserole and a bottle of wine. "That dog isn't just your hero, Martha," Clara said with a warm smile. "He's a hero to all of us." Martha nodded, her heart swelling. "I've always known Bruno was special, but now I see how much he means to everyone." Despite the outpouring of love and gratitude, Martha couldn't ignore the feeling that the danger wasn't completely gone. Diego and Joe were in custody, but their threats echoed in her mind. "I know it's not over, Bruno," she said softly that night, as they sat together on the porch under the stars. She ran her fingers through his fur, drawing strength from his steady presence. "But I also know that as long as I have you, we'll be okay." Bruno looked up at her, his dark eyes full of understanding. He let out a quiet huff, then rested his head on her lap. In that moment, Martha realized she didn't just feel safe because of Bruno's strength. She felt safe because of their bond, one built on trust, loyalty, and love. The days following the ceremony at the police station were a whirlwind of emotions for Martha. The medal Bruno received now hung proudly in the living room, a constant reminder of his courage. Visitors continued to stop by, neighbors offering kind words and small gifts to show their appreciation for the dog who had become the neighborhood symbol of bravery. But despite the newfound sense of safety, Martha couldn't entirely shake the memory of Diego and Joe. Their threats echoed in her mind late at night, and she often found herself double-checking the locks before bed, even with the alarm system armed. Bruno, ever the vigilant protector, seemed to sense her lingering unease. He continued his nightly patrols, pacing the hallway and lying near the front door, his ears alert for even the faintest sound. "You don't let anything slip past you, do you, boy?" Martha said one evening, her voice a mix of admiration and affection. Bruno responded with a low thump of his tail, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Underscore 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 underscore. One cool autumn night, as a soft wind rustled the leaves outside, Bruno's ears perked up. He was lying in his usual spot near the door, his body relaxed but his senses sharp. Martha was reading in her armchair, her glasses perched on the edge of her nose, when she noticed him stir. "What is it, Bruno?" she asked, lowering her book. Bruno's posture changed in an instant. He stood, his muscles taut, and let out a low growl. His eyes locked on the door, and Martha felt her chest tighten. A faint noise reached her ears, a quiet scrape, like someone testing the lock. Her stomach dropped as her mind flashed back to that terrifying night weeks ago. "Not again," she whispered, her voice trembling. Without hesitation, Bruno moved in front of her, his growl deepening into a menacing snarl. Martha reached for her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed the police. "This is Martha Bennett," she said, her voice cracking. "Someone's at my door. Please hurry." Underscore 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 underscore. The sound of the lock being forced echoed through the quiet house. Martha's breath hitched as the door swung open, revealing a shadowed figure, Diego, his face twisted with anger, a crowbar clutched tightly in his hand. "I told you we'd be back, old lady," he sneered. "But this time, I'm taking care of that mutt first." Bruno didn't wait for instructions. With a ferocious snarl, he lunged at Diego, his powerful body colliding with the intruder. The crowbar clattered to the floor as Diego stumbled back, yelling in surprise. "Get him off me!" Diego shouted, struggling against Bruno's unrelenting grip. But Bruno wasn't alone in his defense this time. Martha, her fear replaced with adrenaline, grabbed a heavy vase from the side table and threw it with all her strength. It shattered against the wall, missing Diego by inches but startling him enough to lose his footing. Blue and red lights flashed outside as the sound of sirens filled the air. Diego tried to retreat, but Bruno held him in place, his jaws clamped down firmly on the man's arm. The police burst through the door, weapons drawn. "Freeze!" an officer shouted. Diego stopped struggling, his face pale as officers cuffed him and led him away. Underscore 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 underscore. Once the chaos subsided, Martha collapsed onto the couch, her hands trembling. Bruno padded over to her, his body visibly tired but his eyes still alert. He rested his head on her lap, letting out a soft whine. "Oh, Bruno," Martha whispered, her voice breaking. She ran her hands through his fur, tears streaming down her face. "You did it again. You saved me." Officer Reed knelt beside them, his tone gentle. "Miss Bennett, your dog is incredible. If it weren't for him, things could have gone much worse tonight." Martha nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "He's not just a dog. He's my family." Reed smiled, and a pretty fierce one at that. Underscore 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 underscore. That night, after the police had left and the house had fallen quiet once more, Martha and Bruno sat together on the porch. The stars above twinkled brightly, the air crisp and still. Bruno lay at her feet, his body finally relaxed, the metal around his neck catching the faint moonlight. Martha leaned down, placing a soft kiss on his head. "You're more than my protector," she said quietly. "You're my courage, my strength, my heart." Bruno huffed softly, closing his eyes. In that moment, Martha felt a peace she hadn't known in weeks. The danger was gone, but more than that, she knew she was never truly alone. Underscore 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 underscore. In the days that followed, the story of Bruno's bravery spread far and wide. The local newspaper ran a front-page article about him, dubbing him the Guardian of Savannah. Neighbors stopped by with treats and gifts, and even strangers left letters of admiration at Martha's door. But for Martha, the greatest reward was knowing Bruno was by her side. Their bond, forged in trust and love, had become unbreakable. And though life returned to its calm rhythm, one thing remained certain. As long as Bruno was there, Martha's home, and her heart, would always be protected. Under the glow of the evening sun, Martha looked at Bruno with a smile. "Together, nothing can stop us," she said. And she meant it.